Well, this has been a long time coming. Well, not as long as Blade and Soul, but with the amount of fervor surrounding both these games, it's definitely evened out. It's kind of hard to be in the MMO scene to any degree and not have heard about this game at some point. Oddly though, it seemed to be getting the most mentions for one thing: an intensely intricate character creator. But, then again, you can only make so many deformed monstrosities and celebrity characters that you need to delve into the game itself, and that's where I'd heard very little besides, it's kinda like ArcheAge, which, if you watch this show regularly, isn't the best lead-in for us in Grindstone. So now that I can finally take a look at the game for myself, and have to pay for it in order to do so, it's time to see if all this fuss is warranted. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at Black Desert. Black Desert is a first-time outing from Korean developers Pearl Abyss and Korean publisher Daum Games. Black Desert is also a game that features the unnecessary online moniker after it, so you'll only hear me refer to it as Black Desert to save on syllables. Since Black Desert has been out in Korea since 2014, there's plenty of fan sites, patch translations, and others that might end up taking priority in a Google search, but for ease of understanding, we are playing on the official NAEU release version, published by Daum Games and available at blackdesertonline.com. I guess that's one use for that redundant word. Shall we crack into that character creator already? Well, color me impressed. Black Desert Online looks fantastic when played on high, for the most part. There's great attention to detail, even in the smallest areas, like having trade carts fill up with items when you have them loaded. Water reflections and lighting are done to an absolutely stunning effect. Sadly, the most part comes into play with this game's ridiculous pop-in issue, which can get rather extreme even when not under the load of rendering additional players or NPCs. Those NPCs tend to be the weakest looking aspect of this game. With this character creator allowing for so many distinct combinations, so many of the NPCs' faces are copy-paste recycled over and over again, with many getting affectionate nicknames among Grindstone like Fratboy Larper, a rather dude-bro-looking character who has several clones of himself in nearly every town. There's another surprising issue in that almost all the trees and many of the mineable rocks will look nothing like real-world counterparts. Birch trees look like cedar, pine trees can sometimes look like birch trees, and maples just look like thin sticks. I mean, did no one on the development team bother to check? The birch one is especially amusing since birch is one of the most widely recognizable trees in existence. One major benefit to the varied tree types though, even if accuracy is a major issue, is the way that light will play through them. And the lighting within this game is absolutely fantastic, with rather beautiful sunrises and sunsets along with some truly dark nights that will require lanterns or heavy brightness adjustments to see clearly. The devs gave a nice length of time for each as well, with 2 hours for daylight and 2 hours for night, ensuring your standard playtime will get to experience the change at some point, and it can be well worth it. The shame though is that this very same system can lead to issues with the character creator, giving you colors way off from what you're thinking you're getting, or far worse. Along with this lighting system, we have a rather enjoyable weather system, which can make for some great exploration out at sea during heavy storms, create puddles along roads and in the streets that'll dynamically reflect and react with physics, or most amusingly, make every character in the game look like they were drowned in baby oil. Though, the reactions aren't left to puddles and weather alone, as you can literally bump into the various NPCs and other players to a rather charming effect, like everyone in town is just extremely clumsy and rude. There's one real shame about the game looking this good, is that suspension of disbelief is almost constantly shattered by the clunky UI choices. Seeing the words parking pop up in yellow letters above your horse's saddle, which only until very recently would also appear on the thousands of other horses scattered around towns and roads, was an odd choice at best. Whenever Slimer Satan wants to have a chat with you, a prompt will obnoxiously take up a large portion of the screen, and summoning it takes a frustrating amount of time to play a live cutscene, even if you just press the summon key by accident. You can very easily find the character you made in the creator just isn't the one you'll actually play as, and it's a major issue that the game has years to fix, but just doesn't seem to. There's also more issues with the character creator, but we'll leave that for gameplay. But rest assured, there are problems here that'll show the inexperience of the developers in spades. Through tone and composition, there's nothing inherently wrong with the music in this game. It's a solid soundtrack of fantasy staples that helps create the tone of the game and provides variety in the combat themes and ambience to the towns and areas that you're in. It's fitting of the genre and solid work all around. Now that I've mentioned all of that, shut it off. No, I'm serious, shut it off. It'll do wonders for your immersion with the game, and there's plenty more that's going to fight against that, so you might as well take what you can get. Another downside to leaving the music on is that you'll find that regardless of how well crafted a piece may be, they don't go on for very long loops, and you'll start to notice it very quickly if you play this game as a true sandbox and focus mostly on life skills where you'll spend hours at a time in the same area. It gets grating fast, and unless your tolerance for repetitive music is on the same level as a toddler with a singing toy or a teenager listening to the latest pop song on repeat until all meaning is lost, just shut it off. The ambience in the game is far more than enough to give you a feeling of a living world. Speaking of ambience, here the game shines through, making it all the more annoying that the music masks it, with crickets chirping in the field, wind gently rustling the grass and leaves, or the sound of the ocean's water lapping at the beach. It's very calming and engrossing, allowing you to get the idea of setting up a chair on the beach and just dropping a fishing line in the water and kicking back to relax, even if the game's UI is constantly trying to smother that immersive feel. You'd think with such an intricate attention to detail that the game would be off on the right foot for sound design, but sadly it's much the opposite. The biggest single bugbear is the game's very terrible voice acting, to an almost absurd degree that feels like the line readers were deliberately taking the piss. It'll become readily apparent during the opening narration by no-joke Tay Chocolate Rain Zonde, whose voice, along with myself and Kevin Conroy is often accused for being forcefully put upon, is read with this hilariously stilted cadence.
Nauru was a thriving city of sailors and merchants, and crowded areas were guarded by mercenaries. Little did they know what had arrived. Could any of these people know of the Elysian Stone?
Sometimes the voice work is fine, and to a non-native English speaker, you might think that the voice acting for certain characters is good, but no. There's a difference between voice work and voice acting, and with those inflections and that wooden delivery, no one really pulls in a natural-sounding acting performance. Some reads go as far as pronouncing the same enemy or town name completely differently depending on who's saying it. Some of the dialogue is just bad enough when you read it, and it's far worse hearing Jeff from accounting stuffed into a broom closet to tell you how gold is an empirical thing.
Loyalty cannot be planned? Sure it can. Everything changes according to circumstances.
Money comes and goes. It's an imperial thing.
This is to say nothing of characters screaming all the time for their attacks, with special mention to be made for the Valkyries' highly sexualized sounding noises for doing anything, including getting hurt. Does no one in Korea know what it's like to get hurt, or is this just what they think women being startled by a sudden drop should sound like? Thankfully, though, the sound work for weapon effects is really nicely done, if a bit too loud. Only one issue with that sound work remains, as it tends to be very repetitive and can drive you mad. Trade carts are a prime example, as they already have one incredibly short loop of wagon wheels turning along the paved road, and yet it'll loop for the entire duration of your journey, and never changes pitch or tone at any time. What we're getting at is that the sound work is a very mixed bag, good and bad, competing for each other's attention, so most of Grindstone just shuts the music off or the voice acting, which helped our moods immeasurably. The game's launcher has an often unseen feature for MMOs, the ability to log into the game while it's patching. This means when the game itself finally loads and patches up, you can immediately go into the character select and continue your adventure, or just jump headlong into the character creator. Another feature of the game is that your family name is kind of like an account name, meaning every character on your account will have this as their last name, and family names on the same server share many of the unlocked benefits. It seems that a lot of people don't get that, or simply weren't expecting this aspect of the system, as there's more than a handful of people that simply name their character the same thing as their family name twice. So expect to see a lot of double names running about. I know you've been itching to see what this character creator is about, but I hope you aren't too excited, because despite what you might have seen from various screenshots or simple videos showing off this feature, this has to be single-handedly the most complex and yet somehow disappointingly limited character creator I've seen in an MMO. If those videos or screenshots made you think that your character is essentially a ball of clay ready to mold into anyone or anything you have the talent to transform it into, prepare to have all hopes dashed upon the rocks. I guess I'll get the good out of the way and punctuate with the bad when it comes up. Clicking on the face or the body will offer up far more than just a few sliders for a couple parts. What you have instead, especially on the face, are small selectable zones that let you adjust each part of that face and different parts within it, even asymmetrically if you so desire, from forehead to the side of the head, to the cheeks, the chin, the area around the chin, the nose, the area near the nose, the mouth, what have you, there's a lot. Even the hair can be adjusted for length and angles. The downside is realizing just how little you can adjust most of these things. Some parts, especially on the body, will barely move when you toss the slider in both directions. Some, I swear, will not move at all. With hair, you still have to choose a pre-made hairstyle, and a lot of the times you'll find that it isn't as adjustable as you'd hope it to be. Best example I can think of? Try picking a really long hairstyle and make the hair longer. Chances are that you can't, and you can only make parts of it shorter. Another thing that choosing your hair color may not be reflective of what your hair will look like in the game. The only lighting, weather effect that you can choose that'll be representative of your hair color in the game is 4, so use that when choosing a set of colors. You'll likely have to go darker to get a proper looking color. Fail to do so and your redhead's hair will often look glowing road cone orange in-game. It's pretty bad. You know what color square I had to pick to get the proper looking red hair? Dark brown. Speaking of presets, your entire race and gender are predetermined by your class, and the character creator does not want you to stray too far from that basic shape and look. Would you rather have your berserker look like a short, lithe fighter? Too bad, it's gonna be a hulking hunchback behemoth no matter what you do. You want to create a wizard that doesn't look like an elderly man in a Gandalf cosplay? Well, prepare to have them looking like they're at least in their 50s, as you can't remove those wrinkles from the base model no matter how hard you try. That Michael Jackson that everyone's losing their mind over? That's a Valkyrie, a female class. There's a reason they didn't pan down too far in that picture, and there is no way you could have made that design with a male equivalent warrior class. Sure, if you pick the right things and have the talent, you can make some startling dead ringers, as the internet has clearly proven, but don't expect this to be nearly as freeform as you'd hope. Also, if you spend 45 minutes making your perfect Christopher Walken clone, don't be surprised if you log into the game looking like the default character. It's a known bug, and anything from a channel change to a relog might take care of it. Classes currently in the North American European version of the game are as follows. First up is the Warrior and the Valkyrie, the male and female versions of your common sword and board class. They do have differences that'll set them apart in playstyle slightly, but they should suit anyone looking for a defensive melee fighter. Next up for melee is the Berserker, one of 2 non-human races available in the game, despite this world having so many races. A male-only half-giant bruiser that'll wield dual axes and has plenty of high damage and grapple moves. It's the choice for those who want to get in the fight and just wreck things. If you'd rather play a melee character that has things fight alongside you, the female-only Tamer class has you covered. They can use a temporarily summoned creature to easily turn any 1v1 fight into a 2v1. Bridging the gap between melee and ranged is the Sorceress, a female-only hybrid melee spellcaster who uses dark magic and debuffs to take down opponents. Rated as a tough class to get used to, and apparently one of the better PvP classes once you get your head around it. If you want to get back to nature by shooting it full of arrows, the Ranger class is here to help. Also restricted to female characters only, and the game's only elf character, the Ranger excels at single-target damage and kiting opponents. Finally, the last 2 mirror-ish classes are the Witch and Wizard, ranged spellcasters with insane amounts of AoE abilities. Or they can just straight-up shank a bitch with their offhand dagger. If you want to annoy other players by clearing out an entire field of enemies with a chain lightning combo, you've come to the right class. Just be prepared for everyone to stick you with the OP tag. If you're a fan of the Korean version and wondering why I skipped over the Plum, the Blader, the Ninja, and the Kunoichi classes, it's because Daum figured we didn't need those right now. What's with Korean MMOs and withholding content from the stateside version when their game's been out for years? Note that this game is very alt-friendly. As I mentioned, the family name carries over to all of your characters, and switching between them is as simple as changing the channel on your server. Simply select Change from the character icon on the disconnect menu and hit Accept. They even share a maximum energy pool and get to use it separately, but more on that later. Starting out takes you to the hilarious Teizande narration until you awaken in town and get confronted by a totally not evil in the slightest black smoke ball with glowing red eyes called the Black Spirit, or as I like to call him for reasons that will become glaringly apparent as you play the game, Slimer Satan. The Black Spirit also ties into your equipment strengthening ability, Enhancement, and gem slotting ability, Transfusion. These are done through the use of black stones and magic crystals, and Slimer Satan serves as a means of main story progression. I'd love to tell you more about the story, but I find it the kind of game that's just hard to want to follow it. There's wars going on between the regions, civil riots breaking out in capitals, and the resurrection of a dark god who's possessing other people around the continent. If you play it as a theme park, though, you might wear out quick and feel like the game is just really linear. This is the kind of game where you really need to explore to find everything, and quests of all kind will pop up without you realizing it if you just try to run everywhere that Black Spirit tells you to go. The controls for the game are rather straightforward using your typical action MMO system, with a bit of a hotbar hybrid thrown in. There are some odd choices for buttons, and they can be quickly rebound in the menus, but be warned that several of the game's UI elements will fail to reflect this change in binding, so when combos tell you to use the old key, they mean whatever you rebound it to. We'd highly recommend changing to keys you're most comfortable with, as the game uses a fighter-style combo system for many of its skills, though you can choose to put the more complicated moves onto the hotbar instead. It's a very helpful system, especially because the combo system sometimes has a hard time distinguishing between which attack you're using. You'll find some combos that require rather insane timing to actually pull off, even to the point that you'll need to physically hit the next attack sequence before the first is even done. While often interchangeable, some skills can only be cast from the hotbar, while others can only be cast using the combo system. Taking a death in this game is a bit of a slap on the wrist, save for the hit that you'll take to your level experience, the durability lost to your armor, and a chance for any of the upgrade gems that you have slotted to shatter. While the wonky sword-fighting techniques on display are just a major pet peeve of Dresker, the animation quality as a whole just isn't very fluid. There's a lot of clunkiness in this system, with stiff-feeling movements, especially if you want to go for a swim, which makes the combat and movement feel far worse than it should. There are good effects in play, with satisfying skills to use, but when you feel like you're just fighting through molasses, or you're struggling to get back inside of your party member's boat, you have a system that might just turn people away. The much-touted parkour system may disappoint as well, as it's actually pretty rough, with reliance on context-sensitive situations, and it tends to be incredibly sticky, making it just overall awkward to use. Yet, you'll have no idea how much you miss this kind of system until you play another MMO without it, and while the system really isn't anything to write home about, it does make traversing the game feel a little better. Amusingly, this means the game's other idea of being a sandbox becomes far more appealing, and many members of Grindstone had far more enjoyment out of saying, you know what, screw this, I'm gonna go fish. This really is one of those sandboxes that feels like doing other stuff is more rewarding to an extent, and though there's a lot of needlessly complex systems, you could easily get lost in your own little world. It took us a long time to learn how to get many of these systems to work in the first place. The usually dismissive and unhelpful answer of just Google it comes from the player chat quite often, even when Google was still turning up empty wiki pages and results of does that even exist when searching. Black Desert is the kind of game that will have so many features to cover that there is no way we could possibly cover everything. Things are going to get glossed over, missed, and some of it still isn't all that clear. To this end, we want to focus on some of the more out-there mechanics that often garnered questions in general chat. You may notice upon first fighting enemies that their health bar doesn't seem to be going down at all as you attack, and just seems to be changing color from yellow to deep red before being killed. This ties into the knowledge and energy system that we'll explain in a bit, but with enemies you won't see a normal health bar on them until you gain that knowledge rank. And the knowledge is granted to your character at random upon defeating enemies. Higher ranks are said by the game to make defeating enemies easier, but that just might translate to the easier to read health bars that'll deplete as you expect them to. It's kind of an interesting system, but might confound players when starting out. These letter grades are sort of permanent, as you cannot reach a higher knowledge grade if you already have one, and need instead to have a professor smack the knowledge from your head and hope for a better grade from the RNG when you go back to killing again. The next system, known as the energy system, can be extended through the knowledge system as well. When starting out, you have a maximum limit of 30 energy, which can be increased by gaining knowledge of different areas, NPCs, events, and lore. While Grindstone doesn't have hard numbers on the maximum energy cap, many of our members have well over 100 energy at this point, which certainly eases crafting and gathering at later levels. The uses for energy are rather numerous. Sometimes it's used in NPC conversations to get specific dialogue, or even learn new knowledge. It's used to harvest minerals, request chat moderation, and even to start the Amity minigame, which is a somewhat confusing minigame where you can raise your relationship with NPCs. When you gain enough knowledge for that NPC to be interested in, you can hold a conversation with them, which will bring up this minigame. Their zodiac sign will be on the screen with a set number of spots to fill and a selection of topics to choose from, represented by icons. On the top of the screen, you'll have a goal for that conversation, involving sparking their interest or getting a certain interest score, or my personal favorite, Talk Freely, in which you can just click on whatever the hell you want. Succeed and you'll get some Amity points, and the chance to go for even more without spending energy. Exit and you'll keep what you've earned. Fail, and you get absolutely nothing. Gaining a lot of Amity might be needed for completing certain quests, or to unlock a new quest or shop option from that NPC. It's odd, interesting, but easily something that you can skip if you're just looking to gank and slaughter. Arguably, the single most important system within this game is the node system. This is the system that's used for crafting, trading, and in general buffs your ability to progress in those areas. As you travel around the world in Black Desert, you may start to notice odd arrow symbols or town icons on the map. These represent the various exploration nodes in the world. The major nodes of larger towns like Olvia, Velia, and Heidel will always be unlocked from you from the start and can branch paths outward from there. Be they a small farm, a besieged fort, or some dude sitting on a rock, each of these nodes will have a node manager, an NPC that controls the node, allowing you to unlock and expand your resources by offering contribution points to them. Earning contribution points is a separate system from your level and combat experience, and it's earned with contribution experience that's often gained from quests. When looking at the map, any discovered nodes that you have will make a connection to other nodes that you've placed on your supply chain and be connected with a white line. Choosing to contribute to the next node in the chain will turn the line to orange and signifies a solid trade route. Making solid connections between nodes will ensure that you earn profit from any of the trading you decide to do, while trading between disconnected nodes will give you a massive cut to your returns, allowing only 30% of that item's price to be recouped. Trading is a key part of the game and can be done in several ways. The first and most obvious way is to simply buy some trade goods, strap them to your back, and march your way over to another trade merchant in another node. While this is an incredibly slow process, and you're much more easily attacked by the NPC bandits that spawn along the major roads, it'll actually level up your character's strength, which in turn will give you a higher weight capacity. The second is to get yourself a mount, any mount, and use that as your beast of burden to transport goods, which will allow you to deliver more items and faster than just being on foot. If you really want to take advantage of the trade system, though, you really need to get yourself a wagon, which you can register at the stables like a normal mount and use 2 generic wagon horses, or you can attach your own horses for increased speed depending on those horses' stats, and render those horses essentially immortal. Another plus to attaching your own horses is each mount has statistics that showcase their speed, acceleration, braking, and turning, and will level up as you use them, so horses can be connected to a trade wagon and will earn experience just like the ones that you'd ride yourself. You can train multiple horses at once if they're all attached to the same wagon, though remember once again you'll only earn 30% of the value if you don't have the nodes connected when you're trading. Some nodes will have secondary nodes allowing you to purchase them and send workers from a nearby work supervisor to collect materials for you. This acts as a much slower income of needed materials as each worker must complete a time-based workday before returning with supplies, but these won't use any of your personal energy up to perform. You won't need to collect items from the storehouse, and workers just need to be fed beer to fill their energy reserves back up. We also want to note something kind of amusing and unfortunate, as for being called workers, these guys are treated far more like slaves, and even have quests where many have run away to escape, while their supervisors hire bounty-eyed adventurers to drag them back. I mean, when was the last time your boss hired goons to drag you back into work when you showed up late? These same nodes can assist you in the crafting process, since they can give you a small boost of the drop rate in the areas that you have under your control. The sad part of the system is that you won't see any hard numbers to back up this supposed buff to drops, which can make many aspects of the game's crafting insufferable. See, crafting is already incredibly convoluted, and for many of the more complicated items, it's arguably a complete waste of time. This is mostly due to the way gathering materials for usage in crafting, and even processing them for crafting, requires energy each time. Even more frustrating is, if anything your crafting requires wood, it's completely random. If you even get the wood type you want from the tree to harvest, as oftentimes you just get generic logs instead of specifically birch logs, and when some recipes require upwards of 2,000 specific logs, you can see where the frustration will come into play. This also makes the fact that processing the gathered materials has some RNG built into it, sometimes giving you more of a finished product and sometimes just giving you one, and the experience can be summed up as tedious. Keep in mind that every time you gather an item or process materials into a new form, you expend 1 energy. Add to this that many of the best crafted items like boats and wagons have a limited lifespan, meaning that you'll have to go through the grind again to build another one when your current one dies off. It might not be worth all the hassle. Adding to possible frustration is the weight system. It's a novel idea that's implemented into the game to add a bit of realism to the proceedings. Everything in real life is weight, so why shouldn't all the items you're carrying around? And just because you're wearing your armor doesn't mean it should stop weighing you down too, right? Well, the system is unique to say the least and does make a lot of logical sense, but it also tends to punish you for playing the game like an MMO, and it feels more at home in a single-player experience. There's even the highly amusing idea that silver coins that you use also have weight, and the more times than we can count, some of our richest members of Grindstone could barely walk at a snail's pace because their money was weighing down their trousers. Picking up trade items, even the ones that don't automatically equip you with a trade pack, will tend to weigh far more than most items in the game. At one point I was walking around with an insect that weighed more than my sword. Fortunately, you can offload materials and money itself into the warehouses located at specific cities, and ensuring that you won't move like you just got fitted for cement shoes. You can even use your deposited funds to purchase items from shops in the same town. The storage system is directly tied into buildings that you can purchase at designated locations, which can then be turned into storage space for expanded inventory at the warehouse. You can also choose to transport items from one warehouse to another by selecting the transport option from the warehouse manager and choosing where and what you want to send. Do note that you will need money in the warehouse that you're shipping from in order to actually use the system, and you need to choose Receive once your items arrive, or they'll never end up in that other warehouse. If you want to earn yourself a lot of cash quickly, then by far the easiest way to do it is the fishing system, which can also be done while being AFK. To do this, simply purchase a fishing pole, find a decent body of water or river, equip the pole, and cast your line with spacebar. The game will tell you at the top of the screen how plentiful the fish in the area are, with more abundant levels decreasing the amount of time it takes to get a bite. This is directly affected by how many players are using the same area for fishing, so it would benefit you to try to find a place away from other players and get the quickest catches. Yet, be warned to not just fish anywhere, as each fish counts as a trade item, and they can only be sold to the trade merchant NPCs, so the same rule about having a connected node to your fishing area will apply here. When you do get a bite on the line, you'll get a visual cue above your head and an audio warning letting you know a fish is hooked. Once you begin reeling it in, you'll switch to another minigame where you press the spacebar to stop the meter over the line, and then match the key inputs in a sequence before revealing what you caught for collection. The major reason this is so lucrative is that a single fish can go for upwards of 25,000 at a trade merchant, and you can catch multiple fish with just one fishing pole that only costs 500 silver. There's a freshness feature that also keeps fish from selling at full price if they're not sold off within a few hours, but it doesn't take long to see how you can make enough money to force your cash pockets and pull your pants down around your knees thug lifestyle, now does it? While I can't speak for the rest of Grindstone, I find this to be fantastic as a sandbox. It's almost unfulfilling if you just play it to grind levels, and while there's plenty to be ironed out, it's something I was pretty much unable to put down. I don't foresee myself letting go anytime soon. Well, no one should be surprised at this point that the typical flash-in-the-pan audience descended hard on Black Desert, and the general community feeling is just abysmal right now. It's not quite the level of ArcheAge, but the trolling and advertisement for gold sites and addition of new channels have just made that issue more pronounced. The aforementioned energy system does have a minor impact, as you'll find spam enchanters coming in waves before they'll burn through their energy. But with how high your energy levels can get, it becomes a moot point for any trolls putting in even a cursory amount of time. The game also handles the idea of guilds in that there are two separate versions of guilds. The first is known as clans and can be set up by anyone free of charge, allowing you to group friends and acting more like a custom chat channel and a clan tag, rather than a collective group. What's actually referred to as guilds will act more like a traditional system, with some benefits to members via guild skills. You can even participate in guild quests to earn money for the group, and even import your own custom logo. See, all of that sounds fantastic, but if we've made anything clear throughout this review, is that Daum seems to find a way to mess things up, and this is no exception. When you first convert over to a guild, everything seems simple enough, up until you try to recruit your first person into a guild and are introduced to the contract system. This system is incredibly important if you want to run your guild properly. In essence, contract acts as a paid commission to a new recruit for joining a guild, but they indicate how long they'll receive guild benefits, like skills, and whether or not they can assist in completion of guild missions. That last part threw us off for several days until after enough research I ended up looking up contract details and spotted that only those under contract can contribute to a mission's success, and it's not clearly outlined anywhere else. That guild mission system is incredibly frustrating as well, as it doesn't take into account the level of your guild members, and it never tells you what your objectives will be until you spend the initial price to purchase one of the missions. It won't even tell you how to complete them. More than once we've immediately failed because one of these would require an item that no one could physically buy. The unfortunate matter is that the only way to earn funds for your guild is to complete these missions, and the deposit button that you'd think would allow for you and your other members to add funds to the guild is permanently grayed out and non-functional at the moment. It took us days to figure out the nuances of the urgent delivery mission, in which you deliver trade goods to a specific NPC who will only take them if you're holding one at a time in your inventory. If you don't, the NPC will refuse to take them because they look heavy on you. The missions pay off rather handsomely, though, and we were able to afford the guild emblem registration immediately after completing one. A side note about the emblem, that tooltip that says that you can only register a guild emblem on Monday, it's total BS. You can register a guild emblem at any time you can afford to, and that tooltip is another casualty of this game's completely messy translation issues. Another major problem is that if you recruit somebody into an established guild without a contract, essentially giving them a 0-day contract, It seems that they could never get a contract in the future and must be banned from the guild for 24 hours before being reinvited to fix the issue. This was reported to have been fixed since then, but I've been unable and unwilling to risk it. The most amusing part of all of this is the fact that your guild really can't do anything for you. Got a friend who could use some cash starting out? Got a guildmate looking to supply everyone with decent armor and could use some help gathering resources? Well, too damn bad. You can't trade with anyone in this, so there's no chance of helping your friends out on the tedious crafting system, or to give a friend a boost in money if something happened to their funds. They've even taken away the ability to freely give potions to each other, ensuring that these potions will now become account-bound once traded in an effort to stop botting. Which is not working. At all. It's like we're being punished for their lack of ability to control a situation. There's an interesting feature in the housing system which allows you to spend contribution points within a town and node to buy the various buildings for you to use. These buildings can range from lodging for your workers, processing centers your workers can use for various materials, crafting workshops for various gear or vehicles, storage for extra spaces in the area's warehouse, and even player housing, allowing you to customize and live in your own little place. We'd say to look over the building and preview it carefully if you actually want to live in one of the houses, as they vary wildly in size and shape regardless of the cost, and making your house a 3 contribution point cost location with barely a broom closet's worth of space isn't all that fun. The amusing part is decorating your house will earn you interior points, which directly interacts with the guild system in a unique way. When a guild claims a territory, taxes can be collected from it for the benefit of the guild, and should you have a nice enough house via interior points, you can get a tax break. It's a rather amusing parallel to the richest being rewarded for being rich, only your wealth is measured in how much furniture you can shove into your house. To decorate your house, click on the Place Mode button while the furniture you wish to place is in your inventory. All of the other stuff on the menu will charge you cash shop currency if you try to place it. You can use the game's marketplace system as a method of player-to-player trading, and there's an interesting take on it that allows you only to set prices within specific minimums and maximums, so you can't ever undercut the lowest offer or completely inflate the market to collapse it. This can lead to a little bit of frustration where incredibly easy-to-gather items will seem far more expensive than they should be for the work. But given how easy it is to use fishing to get ludicrous amounts of money, this problem seems to be a byproduct of inflation. Also, you can't purchase items that cost more than the current lowest price, meaning you'll have to waste your time buying every single last once-listed item to get that stack of 20 that you see further down the list, and you'll have to input a CAPTCHA for every time you make a separate purchase. If you do manage to sell something on the marketplace, you can locate any market NPC and collect your earnings, and the system will not automatically give them to you. Hard fact of the matter is that Daum is just so obsessed with stamping out the rampant bot infestation in their game that they've ensured that the game actually plays worse with the more people you have playing it. The game really does feel like an interesting single-player game that's just ruined by the presence of other players, which is so counter to the very idea of what an MMO is to begin with. If they can iron out some issues, get a bit more lax on player trades, and of course get rid of the absolutely archaic tagging system, we'd have a game that really fits in with the living world aspect of a sandbox MMO. It comes closer than many other games of this type have in recent years, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Yeah, this is going to be a bit of an adventure. Daum, what are you guys playing at here? I mean, you already make us pay for the game itself, and then on top of that, you're charging upwards of $20 for cosmetics, furniture, and even charging for single bag space unlock slots? This cash shop really is one of the biggest issues in the game. The prices are beyond the high side for what's offered, so essentially we end up with a buy-to-play game with a free-to-play cash shop. Thankfully, you can easily ascertain the real cost of these items in pearls, the cash shop currency that you get after exchanging with Daum coins, which are the actual purchased currency. The exchange rates work out for 1 for 100 Daum coins and 1,000 Daum coins for 1,000 pearls. The shop itself houses your typical fare: boosters, cosmetics, account unlocks, and the like, though there is something we need to address. The game, by the strictest definition, has pay-to-win elements within the cash shop. That definition for us being any statistical advantage that's granted to a player that cannot be obtained through in-game means. The reason we stress this definition is because this particular brand of pay-to-win is incredibly mild, and gives an almost unnoticeable but still otherwise unobtainable stat boost if you don't pay for it. The stats aren't going to make you a stronger opponent to anyone in PvP, with an arguable exception to a costume that hides your name from players when you collect the full set, but there are advantages that'll make some frustrating parts of the game much easier. It's the sort of a lot of controversy within the chat, but you'll probably know what side of this fence you're sitting on almost immediately from me telling you. I'll admit, I was rather wary on starting this game, and part of me is still wary about the kind of reception it's going to get, but I can safely say I really enjoyed this game in the same way that I enjoyed Age of Wushu. The convolution can be charming as it is frustrating, and intensely satisfying once you wrap your head around it, or solve the puzzle, so to speak. It's a thoroughly deep and engaging sandbox that I've been playing practically non-stop since the pre-launch. I've logged in more than 200 played hours, and many of those hours are visible on my Twitch channel under the stream highlights titled The Adventures of Thunder Thighs and Slimer Satan. If I'm not too busy with the next video, you can catch me in-game on the Uno server. Here's my final rating. This is one of the more graphically impressive MMOs to come out in a while, even if the aesthetic overall isn't all that imaginative. There's plenty of times where I just stared at the screen, completely enamored by the shine on the puddles, the amazing lighting, and the active weather system in general. It's still a fantastic looking game, both in flash and detail, for those who have the ability to run it. This is the kind of sandbox ArcheAge was trying desperately to be, but done correctly. Unless you wanted to gank people right out of the gate, you're not restricted by level to partake in any of the game's many activities. You can start trade routes, go fishing, work on crafting, or run errands from nearly the get-go, and even the limits of the energy system and contribution points will feel far less restrictive once you start using those life skills to further your questing. There's people who can play this game and do plenty of tasks without even getting past character level 20, all because of how levels are gained within the game. There's plenty to find for those who just want to run off into the hills and see what they can discover, which can be very rewarding for explorer types. It's interesting, to say the least. Even with the bare-bones version of the game we were given in the North American market, this is still a game that surprised me at every turn with the sheer amount of content on offer. It was thrilling to discover areas on the map that I'd passed by hundreds of times before, only to find dozens of quests available in many more places, oftentimes with more popping up in older areas as I progressed further down the game. It's a completionist's dream and nightmare, and if you think you can get away with playing this like a theme park by clearing out one area before moving on to the next, you'll spend days in the game without ever seeing a fraction of the world map. To think that there's even larger amounts of content on the way can be staggering. Since our market drew the short straw, or hype made Daum think they could get away with it, and technically they did, you will have to purchase Black Desert before you can play it in this region. It's thankfully a far more tame $30 price tag, but that initial paywall does seem kinda wrong with a cash shop that reflects every free-to-play cash shop out there. Prices within that cash shop are shockingly expensive as well, and you practically have to spend the amount you need to buy the game every time you want an outfit set. Throw in the stat boosters on some of these items, and you can see why this initial cost is such a level of controversy. It's up to you if you think anything is worth it beyond the initial price to buy the game. Convolution can be charming at times, but without any simple explanations to guide you, it's a well of absolute annoyance. Starting out, you'll spend more time AFK fishing while looking up how to do everything on Google. You'll spend all day wondering why you can't turn in that trade item, where your items went after you transferred from one city to another, or why on earth you can't get Ye Flask, because the game's certainly not going to tell you. Knowing that the guild trade missions can't be simply turned in and instead require you to deliver each item individually, with only one of those items in your inventory at a time, is time-wasting arbitrary silliness that caused us to have to fail or abandon these missions several times before we finally figured out all of the nuances. It's not helped considering that this game falls into Wushu levels of translation errors, with some items having a completely different name in your inventory than the quest will call it, others not being translated in the slightest, and the most game-breakingly egregious translation error, having a quest that requires 3 copper ore suddenly decide that you need 3 copper ingots, a typo that boosts the true amount of ore you need from 3 to a possible 150. It's just entry-level foolishness that could have been ironed out in any number of this game's hype betas. Speaking of that, this publisher seems new to this market, and it really shows. From making the game a buy-to-play in this region only, when it's free everywhere else, and including a high-priced but not entirely cosmetic cash shop, to withholding years' worth of content and classes and fixing glaring issues with shotgun surgery, like trying to combat its recent spammer infestation by restricting everyone's chat privileges even further. It's painfully telling of a company that doesn't seem to understand the needs and demands of this side of the market. They are definitely working on it, but it's getting difficult to hold any faith in their decisions right now. Let's hope for the positive, I guess. Next time, I'll be looking at another buy-to-play title that everyone else has already looked at, and a lot of people don't seem to realize was always marketed as an MMO. Well, I'm glad you stuck around, and I hope you enjoyed me barely scratching the surface of Black Desert Online. Clicking on the left video will take you over to the last MMO Grinder episode on Swordsman. Spoilers, I didn't like it. Clicking on the right video will take you to an interview we did at MagFest with Mark Jacobs, creator of Dark Age of Camelot and Warhammer Online, with an interview about his new game, Camelot Unchained. Yeah, things people say about Mark Jacobs in the comments are like what I said about Swordsman. Apparently the guy's got a pretty polarizing reputation. If you want to know how I really feel about the game, this one included, as well as any other past episodes I've done, you can head over to mmogrinder.net and check out the Grindstone Tribunal, where myself and a few other members of Grindstone will give out personal, unfiltered opinions about the game. Other links around here will take you to my Patreon. You can also check out the official MMO Grinder forums, where Grindstone hangs out, as well as our Discord channel, which is probably the only reason anyone goes to those forums anymore. Once again, Slipstream would like you to check out his website, No Tokens Required, at notokensrequired.com, as well as his weekly podcast at twitch.tv/notokensrequired. And if you like what he's doing, you can check him out on iTunes as well as SoundCloud now.